Hello and welcome to the IslesNation Podcast. I'm Pete Truskowski, also known as at IslesNation. I'm joined today by Carey Haber and Mike Rankiewski. How are you guys doing today?
Okay, Pete, how are you guys doing?
Doing well, doing well. Basically running on caffeine at this point, but after last night, I'm pretty much okay with that. Pete, how are you doing?
You probably noticed my voice a little shot, but other than that, I'm doing really well. Obviously, a big win last night for our Islanders at the Barclays Center, coming back from down 2-0 and down 3-1 in the game. Two winner in overtime on a Thomas Hickey goal. So the Islanders take a 2-1 series lead. Game 4 is also at the Barclays Center on Wednesday night, obviously. So the Islanders find themselves in the same exact position they found themselves last year. Winning Game 1, splitting on the road, coming home winning Game 3 in overtime, with the opportunity to put the step on the throat of the opposition in Game 4 on their own home ice. What do the Islanders have to do to ensure that they don't let this series go by the way that the series went last year, in your guys' opinion?
Well, it's funny. The Panthers to me remind me a lot of last year's Islander team, where on paper they're obviously a pretty good team, but they as a group they lack that the experience of doing it as a group together, being in these situations. And the Islanders have shown the last couple nights, especially Game 1 and 3, the ability to come back against the Panthers, and the Panthers have lacked that killer instinct, which I think for many seasons the Islanders were in that same position as them. But for the Islanders to take a 3-1 lead, it's more the same, and I think you saw a little bit better game from them yesterday overall. I think that Game 1 I think was their weakest game. They obviously won, so who cares? Game 2 they started to get a little bit better, and then I think last night, Game 3, they played their best game, which it wasn't dominant by any stretch, and obviously you can make the case Florida was better for more of the game than the Islanders were, but they're starting to get a little bit more pressure offensively, not just from the top line, but some of the other lines as well, starting to keep some pucks in. And their special teams have been fantastic, and we talked about that last week. As we thought that would be a big advantage for the Islanders, and so far through 3 games, it's been huge. We've only allowed 1 goal on the penalty kill, and we've scored 3 out of I forgot the exact number, but we've already scored 3 goals on the power play, which is 3 more than we did all of last series, or last year. So I think continue to do what they're doing and just keep taking advantage of special teams and keep pressure on the Panthers, because for as talented as they are, when they seemingly can't put their foot down and give the Islanders just a little bit of hope, the Islanders have run right through the door and taken full advantage so far.
Yeah, we had, I think, really pinpointed 2 things before the start of the series, and in terms of advantages, and one of them was special teams for the Islanders. And I know a couple of you guys, maybe both of you, disagreed with me on the goaltending, but I said Luongo was better than Greiss, and to date he really hasn't been. And honestly, I think that's been the real difference so far. Obviously Luongo was the main reason why the Panthers won Game 2, but overall, when you take a look at the series, Luongo's had games where he's let in 5 goals, 4 goals. In 3 games, and he even said last night that the 3 games before night kind of took a toll on him. I think that was pretty evident. So I think that's why we are where we are now. But I'm kind of with Mike on this. I don't think it's really reflected in like the statistical sheets and whatnot. But I think there is. I almost want to say that the Islanders seem to be more of a mature team where they kind of seem to have that appearance that nothing really phases them. I don't think they've particularly played great, but at the same time, in years past, we would have seen them kind of panic and let the wheels fall off. Even last year that happened. And this year I feel that they're more polished. I don't necessarily think that means they've necessarily been the better team over 3 games. I think it's outside of Game 1, it's been pretty even overall. but you are seeing a difference in life cycles between the two organizations here, where the Panthers are very reliant on either very young players in experience or very old players in experience, and the Islanders have more of a balanced lineup in terms of their age and experience. And I think, when you take a look at the three games, I think that's starting to show itself. What it means going forward is, I'd like to see the Islanders continue to get 35 shots a game on Roberto Luongo. I think that's been a huge, story that no one's really talking about in this series. The fact that each of the three games, they've gotten, a particular amount of shots on the goaltender, and that's really important, especially when you talk about the fact that there's been a condensed schedule, and he said that he's, wearing down. So, special teams obviously needs to continue to be in the Islanders' favor, but overall, I think it's really about, getting pucks to the net and, playing a strong game in the offensive zone. And, if we're going to talk about, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but I would like to see them clean up their neutral zone play quite a bit. I think one of the things the Panthers have definitely been taking advantage of is the Islanders have really, really poor gap control between the red line and their blue line, and they're basically entering with ease. I think that's something that really needs to be cleaned up going forward. But you certainly can't complain of the fact that, they're up 2-1, and as, we've seen, I know it didn't happen last year, but teams that go up 2-1 in playoff series win 2 out of 3 times. So, they really just got to keep pushing here.
Yeah, definitely the Luongo factor has been, I think before the series, the reason why most experts leaned towards the Panthers pretty heavily was they assumed that Luongo would have been the better goaltender. And through 3 games, as you mentioned, Carey, that just hasn't been the case. And there's no surprise it's 2-1 Islanders. And that doesn't mean that Greiss has been great. He really hasn't, but to his credit, he's made big saves when he's had to. Even last night, they go down 2, and I don't want to say all hope looks lost, but he did enough at 2-0 and then again at 3-1 to keep them in the game, give them an opportunity to come back. And so essentially the Islanders have gotten that big save, whereas the Panthers have not. And that right now has been the difference. Whether it's because of the condensed schedule or the Islanders are just they're just burying chances when they get the opportunity. Luongo has not been very good this series. He hasn't been bad necessarily, but he hasn't been good either. He hasn't made that one big save where the team needs. And even last night, Franz Nielsen's goal to tie it up at 3 was a fairly weak goal. I mean, I understand he got a shot off from the slot, but it wasn't exactly a rip of a backhander. And even the overtime, he got a piece of the Hickey shot, and I understand it's a difficult shot or difficult save to make, but he still couldn't. He got a piece of it, but just obviously not enough. He knew where the play was going, and he just got beat. And that's been the story of Luongo this series. He doesn't look very good for the most part. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of laughed when I saw all the experts before the series pick the Panthers and relied heavily on Greiss. I've seen Luongo in the playoffs before. Pete went through the stats last week. We kind of know what he is. So I'm not particularly surprised that the goaltending matchup hasn't gone in the Panthers' favor through the first 3.
The thing that I find really interesting is, I'm thinking back at the last 3 games, but where the Islanders, and again, this kind of goes back to the maturity comment, which I know is kind of intangible, but when you take a look at this series over the 3 games, where the Islanders have taken advantage have been in basically groupings of time. Like, there hasn't really been, a scenario where they score and then nothing really happens and then they score again like a period or so later. What's happening where the Islanders are winning these games is they're scoring multiple goals in like 4 or 5 minute segments of games. And that's one of the things that, if you take a look back at the Islanders' recent history, would happen to them quite frequently, where things would just kind of snowball on them for like 5 to 10 minutes a game, and the rest of the game they'd be really, really good. And we're kind of seeing that pattern with the Panthers right now, where they are really good for most of the game, but then something happens And at this point, I think it's fair to say the Islanders are a veteran team. Especially when you talk about playoff experience, not necessarily in rounds, but this is their third go around. They kind of know what to expect, and they're taking advantage of these opportunities where maybe they kind of sense that the Panthers are kind of losing confidence in themselves for a period of time, and by the time they kind of regain that, it's too late. I think that's an undertone of this story that no one's really talking about because everyone's so focused on the fact that the Panthers have three key veterans in the lineup that have a ton of experience and cup experience and whatnot. But they also have a lot of guys that have no playoff experience, and I think I don't necessarily put a whole lot of stock in that overall because look, at the end of the day, it's still hockey and the most talented team is going to win, but when you have a situation like this series where, in my opinion, the two teams are very, very equal in talent. We said that last week where, we thought the skaters were pretty even. Maybe the fact that the Islanders have more of a well-rounded, group in terms of their experience and ages and whatnot is helping them here where they're kind of past that point of panic and are really, they kind of understand what it takes to win these games now.
And I also imagine it has to be somewhat deflating for the Panthers over these first three games, where I'm sure if you went to the locker room after each game, they probably feel like they've outplayed the Islanders on the whole in 3 games in a row. And normally you outplay your opponent, you expect to win, not be down 2-1 in a series. So I wonder if this, as you mentioned, if there's some doubt creeping in, if there's a little bit of once the first thing goes wrong, the adversity hits, as you said, do the Islanders score a couple goals in bunches then, and things kind of unravel? I think that's the issue the Panthers have now is they obviously know that they can score some goals and create some offense against the Islanders, but can they essentially stem the tide when the Islanders have their push? And so far, the Panthers haven't been able to do that. And whether it just means a veteran has to step up and make a big play, or they need that big save, which they haven't gotten. But it is pretty interesting to watch the two teams because I think last year that was kind of how the series went, where the Islanders, especially in Game 2, they got a big lead up by 2 goals, and the Capitals just kept coming back and eventually beat the Islanders in regulation. I got that same sense from this series that the Panthers just can't put the Islanders away, and once the first thing kind of goes wrong, it starts to snowball, and the next thing you know, it's a close game later, or the Islanders are leading.
I think a huge example of that mental maturation is the fact that me and Carey were both there yesterday. And the Panthers come out early in the second, take a 2-0 lead, and then they score to make it 3-0, and Capuano challenges it, gets overturned. The place went crazy. It seemed like we had a new life. And then the Islanders went and got a 5-on-3 and scored. And the Panthers came right back and made it 3-1. And I'm telling you, man, sitting in my seat right there, I thought the game was over. And they came back from that. I mean, the way I've been an Islander fan for years. In my opinion, there was no way they were coming back from such a deflating goal. But there they were. They tied it before the end of the period. And they got outplayed in overtime. And their first good chance, their first good shift of overtime, there it was. They won the game. That's a killer instinct that this team's never had before.
It's really interesting to me because if you take a look back at this series, the Panthers have had a lead after 30 minutes of gameplay in all 3 games, and they've lost 2 of them. And, how familiar does that sound, right? I mean, if you take a look back, even forgetting when the Islanders were a bad team, if you take a look back at the last 4 years, this would happen to them quite frequently, where they would have leads late in games and they couldn't put teams away. And I think we're starting to see maturation is an easy word to use, yes, but I think it's just simply experience. I think does have some factor here. And at the end of the day, this team they're not a young team anymore. They're a pretty normal aged NHL team at this point. There should be no surprises to them here with the intensity they've played in 2 tough series before this. Frankly, I would argue both of them have been way more emotional than this one has been so far. And at the end of the day, they know what to expect, and I'm not sure that, even though I think Mike is right. I think the Panthers have been better, and I think they've been better. But I think they're kind of left wondering, like, what is going on here? And that's something that we saw with the Islanders for a long period of time, and it takes time for that to kind of develop and to correct itself.
Yeah, I mean, not to sound extremely cliche here, but it almost seems like the Islanders have learned how to win these types of games, where that playoffs feel they're one play makes or breaks you, momentum swings. The Islanders at this point have been the better team to handle that. You look at game one, Florida gets an early goal, Islanders come right back. And, go up 2-1, 3-2, Islanders come right back. It really is. It's pretty amazing, as you said, that the shoe is essentially on the other foot now between the Islanders and their opponents, where in years past, Islanders, notorious would get a 2-0 lead or a 3-1 lead going to the third, and they'd lose in overtime or they'd lose in regulation. You think, what the hell happened? And it starts with one play. The opposition makes one play, gets a goal, and then the next thing you know, the Islanders just kind of lose all their structure, lose all their discipline, and start flying all over the place, trying to, instead of playing a team game, they try to play a 1-on-5 game. And that's not to say the Panthers have necessarily done that, but defensively they've been horrific. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about the Islanders on defense and how they obviously allowed a lot of chances by the Panthers, but the Panthers have just been terrible in their own end, and a lot of these goals are just breakdowns in front. I mean, even the overtime game yesterday, overtime goal, Thomas Hickey basically just skates in. Jaromir Jagr doesn't pick him up until 2 seconds too late, and it's in the back of the net. The Shane Prince goal, same thing. A defender leaves a guy wide open in the slot. So it just seems like the Islanders have one thing go in their favor, and then the Panthers all of a sudden the wheels start flying off. And yes, they can somewhat play better and they recapture a little bit of momentum, but it's almost, I think, in the back of their heads they have to be thinking, man, no matter what we do, we just can't put these guys away. Yep.
I know. I was gonna say, I think both teams have been bad defensively, honestly, and I think the Islanders have, to a degree, have been a little bit lucky in that regard because I saw a stat today where I think it was Barkov, Jagr, and Huberdeau over the last 3 games have 45 combined shots and 1 goal to show for it. I mean, ultimately, those guys can't be combining for 15 shots a game, and the team should be expecting to only allow goal every 3 games to those guys. So, they do have to change some stuff. But I do agree with the overall premise here, which is, despite the fact that, sure, maybe the Islanders have been a little bit lucky, and maybe they've been able to do the things that the Panthers haven't been able to do. I agree with the fact that when you take a look at this series holistically, outside of really Game 1 where Luongo is just terrible, there hasn't been much separating these teams. I think these teams are very, very closely matched together, and when you take a look at what's differentiating it, I think you can point to 2 things. You can point to special teams because the power play and penalty kill to date have both been very, very good. And I think you can point to the fact that Greiss is making the saves and the Islanders are clearing out his rebound much better. And I know that there's been a lot of rebound goals for the Panthers, but you take a look. The Islanders have done a relatively good job at clearing those rebounds out compared to the chances the other way where they're scoring on opportunities that they probably shouldn't be scoring on. So, I do think the team does need to play better, but you certainly can't complain about the position that they're in at this point.
I don't particularly think that either goalie has been good or bad. I feel like they're both played average games, and that the fact they're just not coming up with a big save. No, they're not coming up with saves they shouldn't make. For example, every goal they give up, you're not like, wow, that was a softie. But they're not making those huge saves. The only huge save made this series was Thomas Greiss in Game 1 with 10 seconds left when I'm sure all of our hearts stopped, and that was a huge save. But other than that, I feel like the goaltending has been average. And I mean, it might be good enough in this series, but you have to wonder in a future series, if the Islanders get that far, how Greiss would hold up and whether or not Halak might be back at some point. But that's a discussion for another time, obviously. So I'm going to ask you guys a question. Maybe someone could help me. Since when the hell is Riley Smith Wayne Gretzky?
Yeah, it's been incredible. It just seems that every time he steps on the ice, the puck finds him in a good scoring area, and he's either putting it in or he's setting up it off a rebound or a great pass. I mean, he's been phenomenal. But I think this goes to the overall Islanders, how they're playing defense. They're just allowing the Panthers to fly through the neutral zone, come into the offensive zone with speed. The Islander defensemen are essentially backing up until almost till their circles before they start trying to close some gap. And then the next thing you know, the Panthers are getting either a good shot or obviously they get making a pass across the ice and trying to get a play that way. It really has been incredible, and obviously Smith has been the ringleader so far. It's funny. Although he has 8 points and he's been great this series. I'm not even going to suggest to take anything away from him. It's not like when he has the puck, he's been dominating. When he has the puck in the zone, flying through guys, making these beautiful passes.
So he hasn't been John Tavares.
No, you're right, and that's exactly what I'm getting. He's been good. He hasn't. He's obviously scored a hell of a lot. He just hasn't. He hasn't been able to. And I don't say he hasn't been able to. Take it from end to end like that should matter, but he's just been in the right place at the right time a lot, and to his credit, he's put 4 goals in already, a couple assists, 4 assists, and he's playing a great series so far. But it just, I think, a lot to do with how the Islanders have played team defense, which has been suspect at best and questionable how they've, whether it's a strategy they go in with or I don't know. It's tough. It's been a really all credit to Riley Smith, but I think a lot of it has to do with how the Islanders have played team defense.
Yeah, I think it's been an issue so far, and it's not. Obviously, Smith is the one that's putting in the goals, and when you take a look at what the Panthers' top 6 has been doing during the series, I refer to those 3 guys having 15 shots per game combined and only having 1 goal. I think that's what I'm talking about when it comes down to there's been an element of luck there that they haven't scored more than that. And then obviously when you take guys like Smith and Bjugstad and UC Jokinen and put them into the conversation, all of a sudden that narrative of, they're doing such a great job defensively kind of changes a bit, right? So I think the Panthers, certainly have – I think the Panthers' top 6 is better holistically than the Islanders' top 6, and I think that's shown in the first 3 games of the series. However, the Islanders' top line, the Panthers have zero answer for whatsoever. They've actually split up Aaron Ekblad and Brian Campbell at points during the series, and they still have no answer for the John Tavares line. All 3 of those guys have been just astoundingly ridiculous during this series. And we spoke about this offline, but I stumbled upon John Tavares' hockey reference page today just because I wanted to be there. And they have the advanced stats at the bottom, and he's like 15% higher in possession than the rest of the team. Like, compared to his teammates, he's just been absurd. It shows by the eye test, it shows on points leaders, it shows pretty much everywhere. And I think, whatever Riley Smith is doing for Florida is really, really good. But I think if you take the Islanders collectively don't have the answers to deal with 2 lines like they would with 1 line. And the Panthers, on the other foot, don't have an answer for the 1 line that the Islanders do have. And I think that's kind of becoming an interesting story here, is that the Islanders are kind of scoring with more or less 3 players. Like, I know, Nelson scored in game 1 and Prince scored yesterday and whatnot, but it's really been 1 line that's carried this team through 3 games.
Yeah, no, it really has. That top line has just been flat out dominant. Every time they step on the ice, you expect them to score a goal or obviously get a good chance to score. I mean, it really, these last 3 games, and we've all watched John Tavares for the last 6+ years. This 3-game stretch has been the best he's played. Maybe he's had a 3-game stretch where he's gotten more than 6 points. I'm sure he has. But just the dominance of every time he's out there, he tilts the ice towards himself. He has the puck on a string. He really can do whatever he wants out there, and no one on Florida has come close to even slowing him down. Before the series, everyone kept talking about Barkov and how he's going to, he could shut down Tavares. He had some success in the regular season. John Tavares, this past 3 games, has went into another mode where I don't care whoever you think the best defensive player is forward-wise in hockey, whether you think it's Patrice Bergeron, maybe you think Pavel Datsyuk or somebody else, they'd have no shot against Tavares right now. That's how good he's been. And he's had 6 points. He can easily have a few more. I mean, a few times he's had a couple chances. Even yesterday he hit one off the post after the second goal maybe. There was a little tic-tac-toe play and he hit it off it was a nice setup. He was a little in too deep, but he's on playing on another level right now. And if he does this for the next week, while yes, I want to see the Islanders get some secondary scoring, it still may be enough to carry them to another round.
Yeah, it's all three of them too. I mean, obviously Tavares is the focal point here. He's the face of the franchise. He's a superstar of the team, but I mean, it's really all three of those guys. Frans Nielsen and Kyle Okposo have been really, really good in this series, and they're not going to get as much attention because they're not John Tavares. But I don't.
No, they have been, but obviously, a lot of the reason why they have had success is Tavares is able to create. He's been able to create offense off rushes of the puck. He's been able to create offense from forecheck and deep and creating turnovers. Obviously, on the power play, he's had 3 assists so far, I believe. So he's been able to.
It's just a perfectly constructed line, though, right? I mean, he's doing everything, yeah, but it's been a long time since he's had a guy that can carry the puck into the zone like Frans Nielsen can. It's been a long time since he's had as good of a defensive player in his line as Frans Nielsen is. And then you have Kyle Okposo, who's just like a beast in the corners and obviously has a lot of offensive creativity too. Like this is way better than the Vanek Tavares Okposo line, like in terms of the chemistry and everything. This is by far the best line he's played on as an Islander. And I'd venture to say this is the best line the Islanders have had in 20-plus years. I mean, this line right now is just on a completely different level.
We've had this argument earlier in the season, and the reason this line looks so good is because John Tavares has elevated his game to another level. It's not the fact John Tavares last year during his best hockey played with Anders Lee and Josh Bailey. If John Tavares is John Tavares, he can make John Sim and Andy Hilbert look like the best line in hockey, is what I think Mike's trying to say here. And I would agree with that because right now, John Tavares, it sounded like he himself, before this series started, says 23 years and that's it. Because this team, he looks like he's not stopping until this team wins at least a playoff series.
Yeah, he's been, so far, he's been everything you would expect from a franchise player. And even in the defensive zone, he's been really good. Obviously he's never going to be a Selke Award winner, but he's made some really good plays in his own end. And whether it's just the urgency of he knows it's playoff hockey, so he has to obviously pick up his play and lead by example, or if it's just something else clicked in him. But he's been great in all 3 zones. And yes, Carey, he absolutely is benefiting somewhat from his line mates. There's no question to Okposo and Nielsen have complemented him very well. They all bring a different element which plays off his style, but Tavares has obviously been the engine and the catalyst, and which is fine. I mean, he's doing what you expect a franchise guy to do, and if he does it again for another couple weeks, then this Islander team could really make a really deep run here.
Oh, totally. Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely agree in the sense that, like, I think, if anything, putting those 3 guys together rejuvenated all of them. Like, obviously Nielsen and Okposo have a certain ceiling that's below what Tavares' ceiling is, but I would argue that all 3 of those guys are probably playing the best hockey of their careers right now. And, yeah, maybe that is due to Tavares, but, in general, like, I don't think I've ever seen these 3 guys humming like this before. It's actually really great to see.
So what do you got? I mean, obviously the top line has been fantastic, been their best line by far. What have you guys thought about the other 3 lines? Especially this Quinn, Strome, and Prince line. I know they got thrown together in the last, not last week, in the first game of the playoffs, and there was definitely some question marks going in about them. They're a little bit on the smaller side. Could they withstand the Florida team? And for the most part, they've held up. They've held their own. They're not obviously a big group, so they do have trouble sometimes getting pinned in their own end against this Florida team. These forwards who are just physically bigger than them and stronger. But I think I mean, I think the three have acquitted themselves quite well over the first three games. I'm just wondering what both your thoughts are on this trio, and did you foresee this coming, or is this, hey, it's a hot line, so just keep it going, or is this could this be somewhat sustainable, and maybe that secondary scoring that the Islanders are going to need if they want to make a deep run here?
First of all, Mike, come on, it's Quine, not Quinn.
Oh, what I saw? Okay, well, there you go.
But I mean, for the most part, this actually brings me to a point I wanted to bring up. These three guys are pesky little nuggets, and the way they run around the ice, they finish their checks, they get in on the forecheck, they play fast, and they've chipped in a few goals. I mean, Quine set up that goal by Strome. Obviously, Shane Prince yesterday got the Islanders back in the game to make it 3-2. And they've been the Islanders' energy line, in my opinion, which kind of leads me to my point about the fourth line, which this has probably been their worst playoff performance of the three they've been together for. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that in all three games, the refs have taken scrums and made the Islanders shorthanded after them. And every single time I feel like it's been like Clutterbuck or Martin. I don't know if these refs are forgetting it's the playoffs or what the hell's going on, but I mean, every single game, there's been a scrum in front of a net, and the Islanders somehow have ended up shorthanded in all three games off a senseless, meaningless scrum. That's really pissing me off.
The only one I'll defend the refs on, and I didn't realize until afterwards, was I think it was game 2 when Suzuki's dick punch Ekblad. And it was right in front of the refs. There was no, I mean,
that's not cool.
Yeah, obviously, listen, if you get away with it, it's fantastic, clearly, but you have to do that when the ref's not standing 3 feet away from you and looking right at you. And but I agree with you, Pete, that the refs have, and listen, Panther fans right now have been screaming all day about the refs and a couple of the penalties that they called on the Panthers yesterday, and obviously the offsides. Should it count? Should it not count? The review. So I'm not going to sit here and complain about the refs. They've been good and bad for both teams. But you're right, you would at least like to see a little consistency, especially in those after the whistle scrums. As long as no one's doing anything egregious, either let it go or just even it up. If you want to play 4-on-4 for 2 minutes, if the refs want to do that, then roll with it. But most of these scrums, nothing crazy's happening. No one's kind of getting punched with an open, with the gloves off and in the face and without defending themselves. So I'd like to see the refs at least let those things go or even it up. But it's been a little frustrating because it seems like there's worse that goes on that doesn't get called, and then you see a little scrum where somehow the 3 guys on the Islanders end up in the box, 2 guys on the Panthers end up in the box, and we're killing a penalty. So that's frustrating, but the refs overall, they've had some good and bad moments for both teams, to put it mildly.
Yeah, I can't figure out what is really going on with the fourth line right now, because everything about this series should speak to their strengths. The Panthers are playing really well in the neutral zone right now, and that's been one of the issues for me just in general. But for the whole season, this hasn't been like a very high event team. Like this is a grinded out kind of team, and which speaks directly to what the fourth line does so well. And I agree with Pete. I don't know if it's maybe the series has just less emotion compared to the last two. I mean, at the end of the day, this is not a division rival. There's not nearly as much quote hatred in this series as we've seen in recent years. But still, I don't know. I tend to agree. I'm pretty underwhelmed with how they've played. And I'm hoping that as we get deeper into the series and the games obviously start to become more intense and whatnot, maybe we start to see some better play out of them. But yeah, I mean, I agree there. And then the Quine line has, frankly, I think been really good, because what they are doing, which the Panthers are doing that the Islanders haven't really had an answer for, is they're playing with a ton of speed, and they are fast enough to kind of run around, close off the neutral zone. They play strong positionally. The Panthers aren't even entering the zone. It's been points where they get so turned around that they kind of lose everything that's going on around them, that the Panthers have taken advantage against them. But size has not been an issue, frankly. I mean, Shane Prince is going against Eric Branson, who's basically a foot taller than him, and with no regard for anything. that's the kind of stuff that you obviously want to see, as long as he doesn't get hurt. But yeah, I mean, I think that line's probably been the best line after the first line. And when we spoke before the series about secondary scoring, these weren't exactly the guys that I was really pinpointing to come through. But I think it's fair to say through 3 games, these 3 guys have really amped it up. And I don't want to get too far deep into the offseason and whatnot, but you have 2 of the guys on this line making peanuts. And you talk about wanting to keep guys like Kyle Poso and Franz Nielsen. Well, these are the kinds of guys that you need, to make that happen. So the fact that they're performing at this level, maybe Garth is starting to rethink his stance on Kyle Poso here. And, it would be, this is one of those things that you can keep a team like this together, when you have that, when you have guys that are effective in all 3 zones performing at this level. So that's actually been a huge positive for me, is seeing these guys who, aren't just, 30-year-old unrestricted free agent types coming in and playing well for one series. These are young players with not a ton of experience coming in and playing extremely well in the NHL playoffs. That's something that be really, really encouraged by.
Yeah, no, the Quine line, sorry, the Quine line, not Quinn, I'm sorry, I mispronounced it. They've obviously they've been the Islanders' second most dangerous line because of their speed, and yeah, they do seem, again, they struggle in their own end because they're just not a big group. But when they actually get the puck out, for the most part, they can move with speed through the neutral zone. They can retrieve pucks well, and they force turnovers, and they're not afraid to at least throw their body around. Obviously, they're not going to plow guys over or on the forecheck, but at least they make sure the Florida defenseman realize, okay, there's somebody in the neighborhood. We got to move the puck fast, and it leads to turnovers, and that's how Prince scored last night. Pulak was able to pick off a pass at the blue line and skate down along the boards towards the corner, and threw a beautiful pass out in front for Prince to put in to make it 3-2. So that second line, I'm going to call them the second line. They've done well. They've exceeded my expectations. Obviously, you'd like to see them not get pinned in their zone as much, but they've held their own. And to get back to your points about the fourth line, I think just part of the issue is they haven't been good in their own end, and they haven't really had an opportunity to sustain offensive pressure. They're much better, clearly, when they can just get the puck, dump it down deep, and then just all attack and just start banging bodies down low and cause some chaos that way, maybe force a turnover and force a penalty. They haven't been able to do that because I think they spend too much time in their own end trying to defend. By the time they actually are able to clear the puck, they have to dump it out, get the red line, dump, and then one guy chase, everyone else changes. So they haven't been great. Obviously, I think they were combined -8 yesterday. So you like to think that they'll pick up their game, but if the trend is going to continue where Florida is going to pin them in their zone for shifts on end, well, they're not going to have much energy to start banging bodies and cause some havoc in the offensive zone.
Yeah, I wonder if the 3 games in 4 nights, thing is having some effect on them too, because that's a really good point about how they kind of by the time they can get out of the zone, they're kind of done. And I wonder if that's had more of an effect, an impact when you take a look at the entire 3 games than maybe one would have expected normally.
I think they were a little better yesterday in front of the home crowd. I think that the home crowd, obviously, they feed off the crowd, and the team does as a whole, which brings me to my next point. And a lot of you know I'm not a big fan of the whole Brooklyn Barclays thing. I miss the Coliseum, all that. But, I mean, yesterday, for the first time all year, it felt like home, man. I was impressed. I was there. The place was rocking. That's obviously good to see. And the players in the media today and last night, it seemed like they were surprised themselves about how loud that place could get. And it seemed like they were really, really just proud of the fan base as a whole. And I'd love to see that because I feel like this team and this fan base, maybe it's because of the whole Long Island thing from last year and the last year at the Coliseum, but they feed off each other more than any other team in the league, I feel like. So it was obviously great to see Barclays bumping, and the players really appreciated that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I said this after the game I was with the game at the game with my cousin. I said this to him walking out. I said, you can take the Islanders out of the Coliseum, but you can't take the Coliseum out of the Islanders. And I think, obviously things have changed, but the one thing that stays the same is Islander fans are pretty nuts, and I think you saw that again last night. And that's something that I know a lot of people, and Pete's right. Like, you could read the quotes; they were kind of like, I wasn't expecting that, because I think they all wanted it, and frankly, had it gone the other way, I think that would have been really, really discouraging and demoralizing. But man, that I was there too, and it was pretty ridiculous to be there. It was a ton of fun.
Well, it came on. I will say, watching at home on television, it came through well. Whether that was MSG's feed or just had any effect, I don't know. But it definitely sounded extremely loud, and I'm not going to compare it to was it louder with the Coliseum or Barclays, but it was absolutely nice to see, and I think part of it was just unknown. Barclays hasn't had that moment, and maybe last night was their moment. And hopefully it's the first of many to come even in this postseason. But last night was probably the first time that there was that really special moment in the game, or moment in a Islander game where the crowd, obviously a packed house, everyone's going wild, and obviously you can't really raise the stakes much higher than they were yesterday as far as first round playoff matchup goes. So it definitely sounded great on TV, and as I know both of you were there, and you're both feeling the effects of it today between the travel and just screaming your heads off and losing voices. So you guys definitely did your part to make that sound like it was Nassau Coliseum all over again.
I will say after the third period, Carey did tell me, see you before the next overtime. And I told him, no chance, we're winning this one in this overtime.
Well,
So once again, I'm right, Carey's wrong. And if you listen to us, that's a common occurrence.
See, I'm nervous to go. I know we were talking before off air about Game 4 and who's going to be there. The last two playoff games I went to, I was at Game 4 last year when the Capitals won in overtime, and I was at Game 3 against Pittsburgh when Pittsburgh won in overtime. So, and even my last few Met playoff games have been losses. So I might take one for the team here and just sit out and enjoy from the comfort of my home. I'm really not sure yet, but I seem to bring the bad luck when I go to these games for all my teams. So
you should probably take one for the team.
I'm 2-0 with 2 overtime wins in Islander playoff games.
Oh, then you better get there on Wednesday somehow. I know you got in late this morning, but the team needs you. Everyone's got to do their part.
I mean, I'd rather walk than take a train again, but that's getting off topic. So, what are the Islanders play on Wednesday, obviously, and with the way they're playing, are you confident that this team will be able to close this series out and not go by the wayside like they have? Because this team, their last 6 playoff appearances, I believe, up until the 2001 series of Toronto, they've come home with a split, and then it's unraveled. So will this year be different, or is this going to repeat history?
I picked the Islanders in 5 before the series started, and I'm not going to back out on that now. So I do think the Islanders will win, and for many of the same reasons I mentioned before. Florida, I think, has played very well. I think they've probably been the better team for the majority of the 3 games, or at least, for more often than the Islanders have in the first 3 games. But it's just, I think the Islander experience where maybe, again, they haven't had a ton of deep playoff experience, obviously, but they've been in this position before. I think they know what to expect. And I just think Florida is a little too green with their key players, or a little too old with their key players. There's really no in between with them. And I just think I think the Islanders will continue to find ways to keep it close and to get a late goal. And I think they'll win tomorrow, or excuse me, Wednesday. I think they'll win. And actually, I think it'll be a multiple. I think they'll put their best effort forward because I think they realize the urgency of the situation because, as you said, Pete, the last several times, half dozen times they've been in 1-1 after the first two games on the road, they haven't been able to sweep the middle two or the games 3 and 4. Last time they've won, and even that, the last time they won 2 games in a row in any playoff series was that 2001-2002 playoff series against Toronto, where they won game 3 and 4 at home after falling behind 2-0 in Toronto. So I do think they'll be able to finally put it together 2 straight wins and even 3 straight wins to close this thing out in the next few days.
Yeah, I'm pretty curious to see how this team reacts. They played really well in Game 4 last year, even with the 2-1 lead, and I know they lost, but I thought they played well. What I am curious to see is if let's say they do win on Wednesday, this team has played 1 game where they've won 3 games in a playoff series. Basically, this Game 7 last year, and we all know how that went. And I'm genuinely curious to see how this team reacts to basically being in an elimination game, but on the other foot, because they haven't really done that before. And so I still lean towards the fact that I think this could be a longer series. I said Isles in 7 before the series began. I still think this is going to be a 6 or 7 game series. If they win on Wednesday, then obviously that changes things a little bit in terms of it's obviously much more difficult for a team to play down 3-1. But this is the one thing that the Islanders really haven't done yet. They haven't been in a situation outside of 1 game out of 13 heading into this year where they've had 3 wins in a playoff series. So if they do get that win on Wednesday, I'm just genuinely curious to see how they're going to react to that. So that's going to be their first unforeseen territory of the playoffs. So I'm not ready to call this Islanders in 5. I still think this is going to be a longer series. And I think the Islanders are going to need to continue to step their game up. I think they've played reasonably well through the first 3 games of the series, but I think Mike's right. As great as the Panthers are, I still think the Islanders are going to need to step up here over the next however many games it is to win this series. This is not going to be a cakewalk. The Panthers are still a very good team, and even though they've had these little blips in the radar, you could see they've had the control of play for very, very long stretches at a time. So
I'm not suggesting that the Islanders are going to win the next 2 games by a combined 10-2 or anything like that. I fully expect.
No, I know.
I fully expect there'll be good games. It just seems that this Islander team, and it's not just in the playoffs. We spoke about it a lot during the season. Is compare them to last year, where they seemed to not generate as much offensively. Their scoring was from amongst the leaders was down across the board. They went through large chunks of the season. It felt like where they were generally outplayed by their opposition, even if they were playing weaker opposition. But yet you looked up at the standings and said, we're second in the Metro, or we're third. We're right there. We're a point out of here, or a point out of there. We're in the middle of everything, even though it seems like we've played so poorly. And I really think that this is just more of that same type of happenstance that continues to go on with this club. Is that you look at them and you say, yeah, that they're not, they're giving up too much maybe in their own end, and they're relying a little maybe too much on the goaltending and maybe a little too much on their special teams. But you look up and they're up 2-1 in the series, and they fall behind early and they find a way to come back from multiple goals. They've done that all season, and I think they'll continue to do that over the next few games. I do think at some point it gets frustrating to the Panthers that they've played, I think, a pretty good series overall, with the exception of their special teams. And you look up and they're down 2-1, and you're thinking, how the hell did we get here? If you just gave me the raw stats and watched the game and didn't see how the goals were scored, you'd probably think the Panthers were up at least 2-1, if not 3-0 in the series. And I think that has to be incredibly frustrating for a younger team to essentially put the effort in but not get the results. I do think you'll start to really, I don't see them unravel a little bit in the Game 4, but I think you'll start to see the Islanders start to kind of get more of the momentum from the puck drop and not allow a quick goal and play from behind. I think you'll see the Islanders maybe get the first goal or two and force the Panthers a little bit out of their comfort zone and force them to come strong with a fourth man, not just three. So I do think and I think ultimately the Islanders will win the next two because of that.
I'm very interested in Game 5 because in both 2013 and 2015, the Islanders got completely blown out of the water in Game 5 on the road, and both series were tied 2-2 at that point. Now, I don't know, obviously we don't know what's going to happen Wednesday, whether they're going to win or lose, but Game 5 is generally obviously a very pivotal game in any 7-game series, and this team has not reacted well to that so far. So that's something that I'm pretty interested in. I think the Panthers are gonna. I think the Panthers are gonna be a very desperate team tomorrow. Look, when you're down in a series, that's generally how teams react, and it's gonna be on the Islanders to kind of really push it and kind of score a quick goal, get them out of the game early, kind of have them doubting themselves again. Because the last thing you want is for this team to regain their confidence. So, I normally, I think I would say the Islanders are in a pretty good position. I think they are, but look, I still think that I think they're going to have to work very, very hard and play very, very well to win these next 2 games, and that's why I ultimately think it's going to be a longer series. Because look, Panthers are a very hungry team too. I don't know if they're going to be good enough to ultimately win this series, but I'm not sold that they're going to lose the next 2 either.
The only thing that gives me a lot of hope is the fact that I feel like Florida's played 3 very good games, and this is probably their best right here. Meanwhile, in past series, like last year against Washington, that team didn't show up in Game 1. I mean, against Pittsburgh, you had Florida giving up goals from behind the net, and it just felt fluky that we were in that series the whole time. I mean, Luongo hasn't been great this year, but he's also not giving up backhand toss-ins from behind the net like Fleury was in that Penguins series. So in that way, it feels more real, and the fact that teams aren't overlooking us like the Caps did in Game 1 last year, it felt like, where they were never even in the game. Maybe because Braden Holtby was sick and shitting his pants, but it never felt like Washington was in Game 1 last year. Meanwhile, this year, all 3 games, Florida's been in the game. They've scored early in the game. The Islanders have had to put their nose to the grindstone right from the get-go and fight their way back. I mean, if Luongo wasn't very good in Game 2, there's a good chance we're up 3-0. For all I talk to the Panthers, could be up 3-0.
Yeah, I think we've absolutely taken a couple of their best punches, for sure. And that doesn't mean they can't continue to punch that way, but I really think it's going to be difficult to sustain that type of pressure for another possibly, obviously, at least 2 games, if not up to 4 games, or 3 games if they win all. If they think they're going to win in 6. But I agree with you, Pete. I think that's another reason why I like where the Islanders their chances, because I think Florida has thrown everything at the Islanders so far, and the end of Game 2 they've looked gassed, and Luongo admitted it yesterday after the game that he needs a couple days off, that he's going he look forward to this. He's 37 years old. They've Jaromir Jagr, 44-year-old guy, and everyone before the series, old man Jagr, and they want to see him win for the romantic side. They want to see him one more crack, but it's a 44-year-old man playing intense hockey after an 82-game season.
And he's been pretty invisible 3 games in.
Yeah, they've had a few chances. Their first line has, as Carey mentioned before, 44 shots on goal in 3 games. That's, if you're the Islanders, you want to clean that up as much as possible. But it's really been his line mates that have, I think, done a better job. I think Jagr has looked, for the most part, generally pretty slow, a step behind, especially as the game wears on. And Hickey was his man yesterday, and you saw the replay clear. Hickey started darting right towards the slot, and Jagr lost him for half a second. By the time he started to move, the puck was already on Hickey's stick, and the game was over. So I think that these games, I think that the Florida has really put so much into these first 3 games, and I'm not sure how much they're going to have left in the tank to continue this type of sustain this effort and for the long haul. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think you're starting to see some cracks in it now. The Islanders have, I think, look like the better conditioned team, to be quite honest, and I think that's going to play a key role in the next couple of games.
But I think the series has been very, very close. Um, Look, they're up. The Islanders are up 2-1, and I think you can go through every possible combination of, from Florida being up 3-0 to the Islanders being up 3-0, and ultimately this is where things stand. And I think if Florida wants to get back in the series, they're gonna keep pushing, and I can't imagine that they're just going to. I'm not sure that we haven't seen the best of what they have to offer yet. That's kind of what I'm getting at. I think when as series get later on and things become more intense, you really start to see the best of teams, especially in the first round. So I'm not totally sold that that we've seen their best punch just yet.
If they have another year, then it's a shame that this team didn't get 125 points, because the effort they've put in the first 3 games, if they did that for 82 games essentially, they would have been up there with the Capitals for the President's Trophy.
Oh yeah, but no team puts in that
But that's what I'm saying. I don't. That's why I agree with Pete here that I think this is really, we've seen the best Florida has to offer. Now you want to say Luongo, you haven't seen the best of Luongo for 3 games. That I'll agree with.
Okay,
But
I agree with that.
But
Yeah.
if you're gonna tell me that their skaters are gonna all of a sudden put up another, put up 45 or 50 shots and have entire shifts where they just don't leave the zone again, and you think they're gonna improve on that, I don't. I think I don't. I agree with Pete. I think we've taken their best punch. I really do.
Well, maybe
And
that's what it is. Maybe it is Luongo. I mean, that's a really good point. Maybe I mean they won game 2 because Luongo made 40 saves. Maybe Luongo's the real X factor of this series,
yeah,
right?
it's funny. Even I agree. Game 2, they had Islanders 42 shots and Luongo 41 saves. You can't deny he played really well. But outside the third period, we didn't really have a lot of sustained pressure that game. Our shots in the first 2 periods were a lot of just one shot and done, no rebounds, no one in front, no havoc. Again, because a lot of it we were spending too much time trying to defend in our own end. By the time we got the puck out, 2 guys are going for a change. The other guy kind of comes in, gets a shot, and then he has to change. It was only that third period where we started to at least get some sustained pressure. And yeah, he played well, but I don't think he had a lot of quantity. I don't know if we had a ton of quality for the most part. There was obviously some good big saves, but that's what I said before the series. I don't trust Luongo in this series. And I understand Grice didn't have the experience coming in, and it's almost crazy to say, well, he hasn't done it before, so how can you pick him over Luongo? But I never had confidence in this series that Luongo was going to have a big series. Maybe he
No, I
does,
think
but I don't think he will.
no, I think I agree with you. I think I agree with you. I think ultimately that's really been the difference so far. If he was above average, it's probably not 2 on Islanders, but he hasn't been. So over the next 4 games, or less, that's the real thing to watch at this point is how he reacts going forward. He said he was tired. They have 2 days off now, but yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think ultimately this is going to be the Roberto Luongo show again. And if he's average or below average, yeah, the Islanders are probably going to win this series. If he's above average, then this is going to be a long one. If he's above average, I think you're right.
Another thing to watch is I really hope in Game 4 that we're not down 1-0 before the first commercial break, because the latest the Panthers have scored in this series is 4:32 into the game in Game 2. They've scored in the first 3 minutes the other 2 nights. And, I mean, you're playing with fire if you expect to come from behind every game in this league. Look across, I don't know, I don't have the exact stats in front of me, but most teams, when they score first, have records something like 25-5. I mean, if you score first, you have a very good chance of winning the game in this league.
Yeah,
So if you're gonna spot the Flyer, if you're gonna spot the Panthers a goal in the first 5 minutes every night, I mean, I don't know how you could expect to come back from that every night.
no,
And my second point would be that coach's challenge by Capuano yesterday probably saved the series.
yeah, I agree with you on both points, Pete. I think it's foolish to think that you're going to allow an early goal every game and then come back no big deal. It's a bad recipe. That's not a way to sustain success in this series or in any series, to be quite honest, or any game. Is especially last night, and you guys were there. Obviously, the crowd's bumping, and you're you're waiting for a reason to explode, and then 2 minutes into the game, it's 1-0 Florida, and you could hear on TV that really took the wind out of the sails. But Pete, to your second point, I mean, that Capuano challenge was just, it absolutely changed the series. That and the subsequent 5-on-3 goal, and I understand Florida made it 3-1 only a few minutes after that, but it just felt like, again, you guys can tell me probably, you could maybe tell me differently, but at least on television, even when they made it 3-1 while it was deflating, at least at home I'm thinking, okay, we could score though. We just need to get the next one, and we're still in this game. It's still okay. We're only down by 2. We're still not down by 3, which it would have been if that goal by Ekblad had withstood the challenge. So you're right, Pete. That Capuano play. A lot of times you don't know when a series could shift until after it's over. You look back and say, remember that play in game 2 or 3 when we had that power play, we didn't score, we did score, and everything kind of turned on its head there. I think most people could tell at that moment, okay, this is the series. If the Islanders can kind of respond to this and play in the remaining half of the game well, they got a shot in this series to win. But if that goal stands, it's 3-0. The crowd's out of it, and I don't think there's any chance the Islanders were to come back from a 3-0 deficit last night.
I think Franz Nielsen said it best on Hunt and Humpty today. It felt like the Islanders scored a goal when they waved that goal off in there. That was such a huge change of atmosphere in there. It really felt like the Islanders made it 2-1 rather than them taking a goal off the board for the Panthers, which by differential it pretty much is the same thing. But I mean, you obviously get more excited for a goal 4 than, you know what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah, no, clearly it's a huge momentum swing. I mean, it's just they went from the lowest of lows, being down 3-0. They look flat. Florida is essentially on its way to a 2-1 series lead, and who knows what happens in game 4, whether the Islanders come out flat again and Florida senses that and goes for the kill, and they're up 3-1 going back to home in game 5. And then to go from that to, fine, we're back. It's still only 2. We're back in this. Basically need one shot, and they were clearly energized. The next shift, Tavares sets up, or Matt Martin had that rebound or the pass from Tavares that Luongo made a great save. Then obviously Vancouver. I was going to say, Florida takes the penalty right after that, and then the next penalty right after that, and Pulock scores. The next thing you know, we got a game. The crowd's back into it, and it just, you're right, Pete. That I think that if the Islanders go on to win this series, whether it's 5, 6, or 7 games, that will clearly be the defining moment, at least early on, because that spun the game on its head, and it absolutely shifted the game towards the Islanders.
The atmosphere was completely different after they waved that goal off. Pete's right. I mean, it felt like the Islanders had scored. I think everyone kind of felt the same way, like, oh my God, like this could be, when they go up 3-0, they're like, oh, this game's over. This could be the series. We all know how Islander fans think. I mean, I think all 3 of us, at times think that way. But yeah, I mean, it certainly felt like we got like another life there, and that was a great call by Capuano, who frankly has had a really, really good series so far. Not a lot of I read this, a lot of people talking about this online today, but it's true. Not a lot of coaches would stick with the young players like Capuano has. Talking about Quine and Prince and Ryan Pulock, who was really bad in game 1. And, after the game, I forget, one of the players or someone who was at the game said this. As soon as the 5-on-3 was called, Capuano ran down the bench and basically tapped Pulock and said, get out there. And right after that, Pulock scored the goal. I mean, that's a ton of confidence to have in a young kid in that situation, and not a lot of coaches would do that. A lot of coaches would default to veterans, and Capuano is stuck with the kids, and it's really paying off for him so far. I think, he obviously, and we've done it too a whole lot, he doesn't get a ton of credit, but I just, credit where it's due. He's having a phenomenal coaching series so far.
Yeah, no, I agree. He's absolutely given a lot of leeway to Pulock, and especially after game 1 where Florida really, I think, carried the majority of the play. I think most people would agree with that. to come back, and I honestly thought, especially the back end of second of back-to-backs, I figured, okay, and I wouldn't have been terribly upset if they put Zidlicki in for Pulak for game 2, because I figured, okay, Pulak struggled a little bit. You're playing another game, maybe you want a fresh body in there. But to like you said, to Capuano's credit, he stuck with him, and he's rewarded him so far. I mean, we said it. Pulak he's a work in progress at his own end. He's not a shutdown defenseman. He was never built to be one, but he still has some work to do in his own end. But he's a 20-year-old kid or 21-year-old kid who's played maybe a total of a dozen NHL games total in his career. But he finally looks like he belongs, because offensively, you could tell he's a lot more confident. He's trying to shoot the puck a little bit more. He looks like a legitimate offensive defenseman out there. Which, if if this is a preview of what he will be in his career, the Islanders, they'll have a good one. They'll have a good offensive defenseman who is a big body, and I think will really grow into a role of a solid defenseman in his own end. But if he can give you 35 to 40 points on a season in today's NHL, those things are gold. I mean, those are the guys that'll get $6 million, $7 million contracts a year.
Yeah, if nothing else, it's a really worthwhile experience for him. I mean, to be 21 years old and playing in the NHL playoffs, and obviously you're right. He has things to work on in his own end, but these are the types of things where if they feel he's ready for it, these are things that really can propel players faster and develop them quicker. So, I'm in full support of them continuing to play him. At least for now, I think this is absolutely the right call. And he's, like you said, Mike, he's obviously going to be a big part of this team going forward. So, keep throwing him out there.
Final thoughts, and I have 3. 1. Josh Bailey, absolutely brutal for the first 3 games and 12 whatever. But on that winning goal yesterday, a nice play by him. So I'll give him credit for that. But this guy needs to step his shit up, because he's been pretty bad in the playoffs. Number 2, I really hope Johnny Boychuk's playing hurt, because if this is what he is, I mean, we are screwed for the next 6 years, because he has not been good basically all year. And number 3, Thomas Hickey is one clutch motherfucker.
I guess my final thoughts are Bailey should be out of the lineup. I don't care about that last goal. I mean, I give him credit on the last goal, but he's just been a train wreck, and there's no reason to keep him in this lineup. He's just been invisible for the first 3+ games, and I know people are trying to find any silver lining with the guy, but he had a nice shift, but I still don't think that's enough to keep him in the lineup. And really, my only other thought is they have to do a better job through the neutral zone, making sure Florida doesn't get speed and get the puck out quick. This team has been terrible clearing pucks. This whole entire season they've struggled for some reason clearing pucks at their own end, but this series has been brutal. And I don't know if it's because they're trying to do it at the end of shifts and guys are tired, or they're just nervous, but too many times they're just weakly throwing pucks up the boards. They're throwing them in the middle of the ice. It really is. It's tough to watch, and it's frustrating beyond belief, because you just give Florida another 30 seconds in the zone, and even less opportunity for offense for the Islanders. So they just need to do a better job when the puck gets in deep and they have it. Make the play and get that. Worst case, just get it out of the zone. Take an icing if you have to. I know you don't know if team wants to do that, but I'd rather they take an icing than you throw it weakly up the boards and you give Florida another 30 seconds in the offensive zone to get a chance. Just play better on their own end. If they can at least clean that up, and they can at least be a little smarter in their own end, getting pucks out, I really think that they'll win this series in 5. I sincerely do. That was my prediction originally, and I'm going to stick with it.
I want to give some love to the Nick Leddy Travis Hamonic pairing, who I think has been really, really good. We didn't really talk about them too much, but they're the 2 guys when they're out on the ice that I think have really made a difference. That being said, Pete's point about Johnny Boychuk is a real one, and I would probably make the switch to go back to the Calvin DeHaan, Travis Hamonic, and Nick Leddy, Johnny Boychuk pairings going forward. I think it just makes more sense given the way the series has unfolded.
All right, so that'll do it for us here. Islanders up 2-1 in the series. Game 4 on Wednesday night at the Barclays Center. Islanders in position to win their first playoff series since I was a glimmer in my father's eye. But, yep, that'll do it for us tonight. Thank you for listening, and let's go Islanders.